Hi, I'm Jason Evans, this is Factor 8, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the meeting with the Paymaster General Jeremy Quin that took place earlier this week. I know that various organisations, including the APPG itself, will be producing minutes and notes of the meeting. The purpose of this video really is to give you my personal thoughts and recollections from the day, from that meeting with the Paymaster General, purely because I know a lot of people would have wanted to go to that meeting, listen in to that meeting if that was possible. And of course, for various reasons, travel, capacity, etc., only a limited number of people were there. So I'll run you through my recollections of the day and my opinion about what happened. We arrive at Parliament, get through security. While we're queuing, going through security, we saw a number of former pupils of the Trelaw School who were in attendance, and people then began to head to the Jubilee Cafe just off Westminster Hall, while we were kind of all gathering and waiting for the meeting to begin. And eventually we head up to, the meeting was held in Committee Room 9 inside Parliament. And, we all start eventually to file into the meeting, taking our seats. Most people had, name places that had registered in advance. A couple of names that were in the room that's worth mentioning. Nadeem Zahawi, the former Chancellor, was there. Alistair Burt, former MP and Minister, was in the room. Diana Johnson MP chaired the meeting. Peter Bottomley MP was co-chairing the meeting. Of course, the Paymaster General Jeremy Quin was there. I'd say in total, I don't know for sure, but I'd say there were maybe 40 to 50 campaigners, people infected, affected. In total, it was probably one of the busier APPG meetings that I've been to over the years, maybe the busiest, actually, come to think about it, which is perhaps why we needed a committee room, whereas in the past, APPG meetings have often been held in the smaller rooms inside Portcullis House as well. So it was a busy and well-attended meeting. The meeting kicks off, and we're told that Jeremy Quin is going to speak for 15 minutes, and then we would have around 45 minutes for questions from campaigners and people impacted. And it's worth saying now that before the meeting, I think everyone that was attending, certainly everyone I spoke to beforehand, expectations were extremely low to non-existent that we would get the promised update on the work that's been done on the compensation framework. And I think almost from the first couple of sentences we heard, I began to see people looking at each other and that realization kind of sinking in that, oh no, this isn't going to be an update, which we expected. But I guess the difference is there was still this hope that maybe we might be wrong. But of course we weren't wrong. So what we got from Jeremy Quin was 15 minutes, basically a 15-minute recap of what has happened that everybody already knows in terms of when the inquiry began, when it began hearing evidence, the fact it made an interim report, what happened with the interim report, the fact that the inquiry has now finished its hearings, stuff that everybody, none of it was new information, certainly nothing that I can recall. I think maybe one of the only significant things that was new information, although how significant it is, I'm still not quite sure, was that we were told that Jeremy Quin has set up a small ministerial group to help move things forward, which wasn't mentioned. If you cast your mind back to the debate, December the 15th, I believe, last year, when we were told in the House of Commons by Jeremy Quin that a permanent secretary level cross-departmental group had been set up to take this forward. And I'll come back to that point shortly. So eventually, Jeremy wraps up the recap, let's call it, and we then go to questions and answers. I'm not going to go through every single question and every single answer that was asked and given. I'm also not going to say who asked what and exactly what the response is, but I'll give you my general reflection on how the questions and answers went down. There were a number of questions, including from myself, pressing Jeremy to give us more information about what work, if any, has actually already taken place. And I have to tell you that we were not successful in extracting really any meaningful information from him on that point. We were told that some meetings had taken place, but only a limited number, and we really weren't given any information about what those meetings precisely may have been about, if there were any actions, if any actions had actually happened. I suspect the answers to a lot of these questions are no. I hope I'm wrong. I could be wrong. But it wasn't very reassuring, particularly given everything that's happened in the past, that much work, not just meetings, but work has actually already happened, and much of it was deferred to, what we were told, when Sir Brian issues the final report, that will be the trigger to actually make things happen. And the point was made that was never the point. The point of the compensation framework, in fact, the proposal that was made to Oliver Dowden back in 2020, was to avoid exactly that situation, to have everything ready to go when the final report comes, not to get the final report and then start doing something. So it was quite tense. It was quite tense on that point. It was quite tense. Somebody asked about ongoing payments, the current support scheme payments continuing. And I think there was a sense in the room, and I don't want to overplay this, there was a sense in the room that Jeremy Quin was not wanting to make the same sort of commitment that was made by Matt Hancock during the inquiry, that those support scheme payments would continue for life, or that there was no intention of stopping them. There wasn't quite that same level of commitment from Jeremy Quin. He said something to the effect of that Sir Robert makes recommendations in his report about that, and ultimately we need to wait for the final report from the inquiry. He was unaware, I can say this for sure, he was unaware, because he said this directly, of what Matt Hancock had said in relation to support scheme payments during his evidence to the inquiry. Someone who I believe was a constituent of Matt Hancock's also said that Matt Hancock had basically told him the same thing he'd said at the inquiry about those payments continuing for life during a constituency surgery meeting. So I could sense concern in the room on that point for sure. One campaigner who was in the room tried very hard and very well to try and get the minister to commit to having basically sorted out compensation before the next general election. Jeremy would not give that commitment. He made the point that he could not make commitments due to collective government and not being able to make commitments on his own off the cuff in the meeting. The campaigner in question did try quite hard to get that to happen, but it just wasn't happening. And I think there were a number of questions where people asked for commitments for various things, and there were no commitments to anything. And I have to say, something I missed out was that right at the beginning of the meeting, when Jeremy Quin first began speaking, he opened his speech by saying, "I haven't come here," these were the words, "with some great expose," which I think was his way of saying, don't expect any new information. And I have to say, I did feel kind of particularly sorry for people that had travelled a great distance. For myself, it's not a huge distance from the Midlands, but for people, that had come down from Scotland, people had come from Northern Ireland, expecting an update on what work has been done, to get a recap of what's already happened with the inquiry was not great, to say the least. So you could sense the disappointment. It was tangible. So I mean, and as you can imagine, the points we've been raising for quite a while now were made during the questions and answers about compensation payments to parents, to those who have lost parents, to the estates of those who have died, about getting interim compensation payments to those groups of people, about the need for legal representation. The point was made about, could the meeting have been made more accessible for those who weren't able to be there in person? Those points were made and heard. And eventually the meeting came to an end. And afterwards, Jeremy Quin spent, I'd say, maybe 15 minutes having some small kind of one-on-one conversations with people. And then basically that was the end of the meeting. So I'm sorry to say, there's no great news to report, but I know a lot of people would have wanted to be there, weren't able to be there, want to know more about what happened. And those are my personal thoughts and recollections of what happened. It's a very brief summary of what was an hour long, just to give people an idea. But as I say, the key point is there was no great expose, as Jeremy Quin put it. There was no really new information. There were many more points made that I haven't mentioned. But yes, the work will carry on. The work of Factor 8 will carry on. The campaign carries on. I think, despite the fact that what I've just been talking about may not be the most encouraging news in the world, bit by bit, I hope people can see and feel, or at least I feel, that we are making progress bit by bit. We're getting there. We just need to keep pushing. And I'm feeling more optimistic, certainly more optimistic than I was 5-6 years ago. So hopefully that is borne out. It does feel like we're getting there. Something that springs to mind before I wrap up this video, if there is something encouraging we can take away from the meeting, Jeremy did refer to the contaminated blood scandal, the infected blood scandal, as a scandal. I think I counted at least 5 times. He referred to it as a scandal and said, at this point, we just want to get this whole thing resolved once and for all. It's gone on for too long. Virtually every MP, has had or has a constituent impacted by this. And call me a fool, I kind of believed him on that point. I kind of believed him. Now, the big question is what that resolution looks like. That's the ultimate point. I'm sure the government does want it resolved. I'm sure they don't want this constantly just there all the time for years and years and years. I'm sure they do want to get it resolved, but it's what that resolution looks like. We'll keep pushing. If people do have any other questions about the meeting that I might be able to answer, I'm happy to answer them, but I don't think there's any more great expose, to use that term again, that I can give you. I'm Jason Evans. This is Factor 8. See you next time.